Hello everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to make these see-through masks. These are great for hearing impaired or if you just want to show off your smile. So come along and I'll show you how to make these.
The first thing we're going to need is this mask pattern. I adapted this pattern from another YouTube video that I saw. This pattern will be available in the description below. It does run a little small because my face is small, so you're welcome to adjust it however you need to. The next thing you're going to want to get is some cotton fabric. I went ahead and used this pretty colorful stuff. However, I did read that if you're going to use this around people who are hard of hearing, the colorful fabric can be a little distracting, so just keep that in mind. You're going to need some pins, some scissors, a quarter width of elastic. I recommend a sewing machine, but you can also do this by hand with a thread and needle. Finally, you're going to need some clear vinyl. This is 2 millimeters thick, but I recommend getting at least 4 or 6 millimeters thick. The first step is going to be flipping our fabric inside out so that the colorful side is actually touching the colorful side and that the dull side of the fabric is on the outside. This will make sense in just a second. Now that your fabric's inside out, you're going to want to iron out any type of wrinkles or marks that are in your fabric. Once your fabric's wrinkle free, we're actually going to fold it another time so that we have 4 layers of fabric total. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to press that as well. Next, you're going to want to grab that mask pattern that I linked down below. And we're just going to fold the mask pattern in half and we're going to attach it to the folded side of the fabric. And the reason I do this is because I don't want to cut 2 separate layers of fabric. I just want to cut it all in one. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pin it down and then I'm just going to start cutting all the way around. You want to make sure that you have really good sharp scissors because right now I'm cutting through 4 layers of fabric. Once you've cut out the outer part of the pattern, now it's time to go ahead and cut where our vinyl is going to go. Now, I went ahead and I made my vinyl piece pretty wide. You're welcome to make it as big or small as you like. If you also want to use this pattern without the vinyl, then you would just skip this step. I'm also going to make 2 cuts at the corners at the very end of this square rectangle here. So you can see me struggling with trying to do that. But you want to cut them diagonally because what you're eventually going to do is you're going to have these little flaps that you're going to fold down in the next few steps. You want to make sure that you're not cutting these diagonal slits too far because if you cut them too far, they're just going to start to get too close to the edge of your mask and you won't have very much space for the fabric. Voila! There we go. There's an open mask pattern that we have here in our fabric. We're going to go ahead and stitch down from the top corner to the bottom corner. Before we do that, we are also going to add our elastic in the side. Now it's time for my favorite part. Let's go ahead and sew our first seams. You want to make sure everything lines up properly because this is really what keeps the pattern in its place. Now, it was at this point that I realized I actually forgot to switch out my bobbin color from the last thing I sewed, so just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go, much better. So now we're ready to go ahead and sew from the top all the way to the bottom. And don't forget to put in this anchor stitch to make sure that your seams aren't going to unravel. And then we just take it really slow. I leave about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now it's time to put in the elastic that will go around our ears. I've seen patterns where they, instead of doing elastic, they'll do ties. You're welcome to do whatever works best for you. So what I'm doing now is I'm placing the elastic in between the 2 layers of fabric here, and then I'm just going to sew right over top of the elastic. I also recommend over-stitching where your elastic is, just to make sure that there's a secure hold. I'm now going to take the other side of the elastic and sew that part to the mask to create a loop. I highly encourage using pins. They will help keep these two fabric pieces together, especially if you're a beginner. I personally hate using pins just because it takes so much time, so I kind of wing it while I sew, but if this is your first time, you definitely want to make sure your fabric doesn't move, and pins will help secure that. Remember that you're going to do the exact same process to the other side of the mask. Alrighty, so as you can see, I sewed both sides of the mask. I did stop right before I reached those dips at the top and the bottom of the mask. We're going to sew those a little differently, so make sure that you don't continue throughout the whole perimeter. Now I'm going to turn this so that the right fabric is facing outward, or otherwise known as right side out. After I unfolded it, I take my iron and just press it down to make sure that it lays flat. Now it's time to move on to the next part. When we first cut out the pattern, we made those little slits in the corners of the rectangle. This is because we're going to turn over a 1/4 inch flap, I guess is the right word, to kind of finish off the edge of this window. So I do this all the way around, and I'll just fold it over, take my iron and press a little bit and then move along. You're gonna do this to both sides. So this front side, and then I'm gonna flip it over and do it to the back side. So I'm just gonna go ahead and speed through, since this is probably the most time-consuming part out of the whole project. And there we go, we've got a nice, clean, finished pressed edge for our window. Now it's time to move on to the vinyl. You're going to want to use this template here to cut out the perfect rectangle that will fit in the window of your mask. However, I do leave a little extra on the short sides just to make sure I have enough room in case I need to move things around. Now we're going to go ahead and add our vinyl piece into our mask. So we're going to slip it in between the fabrics here, and just be careful not to move around that 1/4 inch flap that we did in the previous step. I also recommend snipping the corners just a little bit off of the vinyl so that you can fit it in there a little easier. I do apologize, I didn't realize that you couldn't see this part of me cutting the corners in the camera, so my bad. Now I just kind of massaged the vinyl into its place here, and I do recommend using pins after you've got it in the place. Once again, I don't like using pins, so I kind of winged it. However, this would have made a lot more sense, and I would have had a lot less headache when it came to actually sewing it on the sewing machine. Back at the sewing machine, we're going to go ahead and sew around the window here. I try to get as close to the edge as possible, just to make sure that I'm getting as much vinyl as I can. And while I was sewing, I realized that I actually ran out of bobbin thread. This bobbin has not been very cooperative on this project. Just be careful because the vinyl does get a little slippery and it can shift and move. I usually stop and pause and readjust just to make sure that it's not moving too drastically. So the final step of these masks was to fold it in half and sew the top and the bottom V. Unfortunately, my camera didn't pick this up the first time I filmed, so I apologize that I wasn't able to show you how I did this live. However, all you have to do is just sew that at the top and the bottom, and then once it's sewn, you're going to turn it right side out, and there you go. You've got yourself a clear mask. The shorter section is the section that goes on your nose, and this longer section is what goes under your chin. So that's how you know if it's upside down or not as well. Here we go. I'm modeling our beautiful mask that we just made. Stick around and I'll show you how you can defog your mask. Defogging the mask is really simple. All we're going to need is some dish soap and a paper towel. I go ahead and I make this paper towel pretty small because I want to use this to rub the dish soap to the inside of the mask. Now I'm going to take my mask and I'm just going to rub the dish soap all over the vinyl covering. So I'm just going to wipe off all of the dish soap that I put on there, any excess or anything like that, until it's pretty smooth, and then I know that it'll be ready to go. Alright, so that's going to conclude this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for coming along and making these masks with me. If you enjoyed this video or you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section. And if you really want to, you are also welcome to press that like button and the subscribe button. Alright, have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Perfect.